wonderful Sunday. It is the third one of February. Let's see, the 18th, 11th, 4th. Yeah, and we have one more to go. But I didn't bring a book, but I have this one, and I knew that I would find one today, and I found this in the estate sale just now. And even though it's not a children's book, but it is appropriate for this month. And it's good to know the history. And this is by Richard Bell, an associate professor of history at the University of Maryland, College Park. He holds a PhD from Harvard. Dr. Bell is the author or co-editor of the multiple journal articles and 3 books, We Shall Be No More, and 2 other books. Well, anyway, this is called America's Long Struggle Against Slavery. And there are a few pictures. So it's going to take a long time to go through this. I think I'll just read this on Sundays. But, it's something to examine. I think it's going to probably take the rest of the year. Anyway, how do you slay a many-headed monster? How do you defeat an economic system deaf to the cries of conscience and morality? How do you destroy an entrenched special interest that profits from treating people like property? For 3 centuries, men and women committed to resisting the spread of slavery in British North America and the United States grappled with these questions, searching for ways to save themselves and others from the dehumanizing consequences of commodification. This offers a rare chance and step into their shoes as we examine the different tools and tactics, means and methods that Americans, both black and white, have used to escape slavery or try to exterminate it. We will confront the grand problems that animated all those who fought to end slavery. Should slavery be fought with violence? How do you generate moral outrage? How do you convert moral outrage into political action? Whose responsibility is it to act? The year 2013 marked the 150th anniversary of President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. 1863. Which abolished slavery within the 11 jurisdictions that comprised the Confederate States of America during the Civil War. The year 2015 marked the 150th anniversary of the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in 1865, an act of law that formally and finally outlawed slavery across the entire country. These momentous events, reminders of the blood and treasure spilled during the Civil War to secure slavery's destruction, deserve commemoration, and their authors deserve their plaudits. But these 2 important anniversaries also obscure as much as they illuminate, suggesting that the work of achieving slavery's demise was achieved by lawmakers in Washington with a few scratches of their pens. That version of events is profoundly misleading. This course, so this is like a course, offers a different, more complicated vision of the fight against slavery. It advances the proposition that the demise of slavery in America was a long time coming, the result of many decades of struggle, opposition, and resistance by a large and often unfamiliar cast of characters. It offers participants the chance to rethink the commonly held view that Lincoln's scrawled signature on the Emancipation Proclamation was the most important event in the nation's struggle with slavery. Right, to rethink that. On the contrary, this course presents a dramatic conceptual alternative to this triumphal view of presidential courage. This alternative places the acts of black field workers and fugitives, of preachers and vigilantes, and of white soldiers and activists alongside the familiar figure of President Lincoln. The rapacious diversity and dynamism of slavery in America between 1619 and 1863 has been matched only by the unceasing variety and adaptability of attempts to overthrow it. The Civil War, which began in 1861, marked the climax of this fight. But the slave system had been compromised long before the Republican Congress. President Lincoln and the Union Army drove a stake through its heart and finished the job. Decades before the Civil War, African Americans had set about finding ways to free themselves, to exit slavery any way they could, to ameliorate its worst effects, and to claim for themselves some sense of agency, dignity, and individual identity. Without enslaved people's daily demonstrations that they preferred freedom to bondage, no larger biracial movement to obliterate slavery would have emerged before the Civil War. This course follows the story of opposition to African slavery in America from the dawn of European overseas expansion in the late 15th century to the end of Reconstruction in 1877 and beyond. The course is divided into 5 generational periods using categories popularized by Ira Berlin, a professor, in his 2003 book, Generations of Captivity. The first section encompasses a cluster of lectures and readings devoted to the charter generations, covering the period from roughly 1492 to roughly 1699. Subsequent clusters of lectures describe the plantation generations, the revolutionary generations, the migration generations, and finally the freedom generations in and around the era of the Civil War. Now, when was this copywritten? 2020. So it's not that old. And, well, let's see. We can look at the first picture here. Understanding the fight against slavery. Let me see if I can get here. Slavery never had the consent of those it sought to oppress. Before the end of the 18th century, enslaved people fought this institution largely on their own, unable to imagine that their descendants would one day secure the support of armies of white allies united in the cause of immediate abolition. Until Vermont became the first American state to prohibit slaveholding within its borders in 1777, the concept of abolishing slavery had no meaning. For generations prior, individual enslaved people had preferred to focus on liberating themselves and their families. And here's another picture. An isolating challenge. African slaves were very isolated in the beginning, and it took many decades for any organized coalition of northern free blacks and their white allies to emerge. Even then, it was the slaves themselves who continued to take the lead. As the northern free black population grew in the aftermath of the Revolutionary War, the activists in this community linked their faces to those still enslaved, relying on black fugitives from the southern states to testify to the regime's horror to northern white people who could never experience it for themselves. Without enslaved people's daily demonstrations that they preferred freedom to bondage, no larger biracial movement to obliterate slavery would have emerged before the Civil War. And here's a picture of Thomas Jefferson held more slaves at his death on July 4th, 1826, than he had on the date 50 years earlier, when he had famously declared that all men are created equal. So this is going to be an interesting read. And like I said, I didn't choose this, but it chose me and it chose you. So like I said, we're going to go through this course and learn more about this institution. All right. Hope you have a great evening. Stay woke and celebrate freedom every day.